Parsha Eikev, and it is for the Refuah Shalema of Moshe Shimon ben Leah Esther Chaya HaLevi. So we start off by V'haya Eikev Tishmu'un Eis HaMishpatim Ha'ela. Very famous first verse, and it teaches us basically every mitzvah counts. The verse means when you hearken to these ordinances. But the word used is quite unusual, Eikev. So we never know which mitzvah opportunity is the one through which we realize our purpose. Every small favor, every small contribution we make, every endeavor we get involved in could be the one for which we are here in this world. Therefore, we should never see any mitzvah as too small or unworthy of our attention and enthusiastic devotion. Also, our commitment to Torah should be such that it permeates us entirely, so that even our heel, the lowest and the least sensitive part of the person, hearkens to these laws, observes them, and does them. In other words, our relationship with God should not be confined to the holy days of the year or to certain holy hours we devote to prayer and study, but should also embrace our everyday activities. Indeed, this lowly and spiritually insensitive part of our life, like the heel, is the foundation of our relationship with God, in the same way that the heel is the base upon which the entire body stands and moves forward. That's Lubavitcher Rebbe. Now, the signature of a true leader. As an example of God's willingness to forgive the Jewish people for their misdeeds, Moshe recounted the incident of the golden calf. Va'espos b'shnei haluchos. Moshe said, "When I saw that you had made the golden calf, I grasped the two tablets and hurled them from my two hands, shattering them before your eyes." Moshe was already carrying the two tablets, so he had no need to grasp them in order to break them. He grasped them as a gesture of ownership. He wanted to acquire them as his own personal property in order to assume the full blame for breaking them. We see here Moshe's selfless devotion to the Jewish people. Not only did he break the tablets in order to destroy the evidence of the Jewish people's covenant with God that they had just broken, not only was he willing to give up his life in order that God forgive the Jewish people, he even took upon himself the blame for breaking the tablets. And let us recall that Moshe had absolutely no part in the incident of the golden calf. He was not even guilty of not trying to prevent it, since he was not present when it took place. Moshe's example is a lesson for us all, for we are all leaders. We are all responsible for each other, whether in the circle of the family, of our friends, of our associates, of the Jewish people, or of all humanity. We should be ready and willing to give up whatever necessary, our resources, our reputations, even our lives, in order to ensure the survival of the Jewish people and the furtherance of our divine mission to transform the world into God's true home. Now, emulating God. So a sequence of verses in this week's Sedra gave rise to a beautiful Talmudic passage, one that has found a place in the Siddur, in the prayer book. It is among the readings we say after the evening service on Saturday night as Shabbat comes to an end. Here is the text on which it is based. For the Lord your God is God of gods and Lord of lords, the great, mighty, and awe-inspiring God who shows no favoritism and accepts no bribe. He upholds the cause of the orphan and widow and loves the stranger, giving him food and clothing. The juxtaposition of the two verses, the first about God's supremacy, the second about his care for the low and lowly, could not be more striking. The power of powers cares for the powerless. The infinite great one shows concern for the small. The being at the heart of being listens to those at the margins, the orphan, the widow, the stranger, the poor, the outcast, the neglected. On this idea, the 3rd century teacher Rabbi Yochanan built the following homily. Wherever you find the greatness of the Holy One, blessed be He, there you find his humility. This is written in the Torah, repeated in the prophets, and stated a third time in the writings. It is written in the Torah, for the Lord your God is God of gods and Lord of lords, the great, mighty, and awe-inspiring God, who shows no favoritism and accepts no bribe. Immediately afterwards it is written, he upholds the cause of the orphan and widow and loves the stranger, giving him food and clothing. It is repeated in the prophets as it says, so says the high and exalted one who lives forever and whose name is holy. I live in a high and holy place, but also with the contrite and lowly in spirit, to revive the spirit of the lowly and to revive the heart of the contrite. It is stated a third time in the writings, sing to God, make music for his name, extol him who rides the clouds. God is his name, and exult before him. Immediately afterwards it is written, Father of the fatherless and judge of widows is God in his holy habitation. That's the Gemara in Megillah. It is this passage that found its way into the Ashkenazi service at the end of Shabbat. Its presence there is to remind us that as the day of rest ends and we return to our weekday concerns, we should not be so caught up in our own interests that we forget others less favorably situated. To care only for ourselves and those immediately dependent on us is not the way of God. This idea, counterintuitive, unexpected, and life-changing, is one of the great contributions of the Torah to Western civilization, and it is set out in the words of our Sedra, when Moshe told the people about the God of gods and Lord of lords, the great, mighty, and awe-inspiring God, whose greatness lay not just in the fact that he was creator of the universe and shaper of history, but that he upholds the cause of the orphan and widow and loves the stranger, giving him food and clothing. So those who emulate his ways and also do this are the true men and women of God. The Mezuzah, the perfect reminder. The Torah portion of Eikev contains the commandment of Mezuzah. And you shall inscribe them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Concerning the mitzvah of Mezuzah, the Rambam writes, it is obligatory to be scrupulous with regard to Mezuzah. Whenever he enters or leaves his house, he will encounter the unity of his name. He will be reminded of his love for him and will be roused from his sleep and the errors of indulging in mundane delights. He will then know that only knowledge of God is eternal. He will immediately come to his senses and follow the paths of righteousness. We must understand why the Rambam states it is obligatory to be scrupulous with regard to Mezuzah, rather than using the seemingly more appropriate phrase, it is obligatory to be scrupulous with regard to the mitzvah of Mezuzah. Similar to his statement, it is obligatory to be scrupulous with regard to the mitzvah of tzitzis. At first glance, it would seem that the Rambam's reason for writing it is obligatory to be scrupulous with regard to Mezuzah, rather than the mitzvah of Mezuzah, is that the mounting of Mezuzah is not an obligatory mitzvah. One need not select a dwelling that is obligated to have a Mezuzah so as to be able to fulfill this commandment. However, if this were the reason, then the phrase it is obligatory would seem to be out of place. The Rambam should have used the expression one should make an effort, or the like. It therefore seems that the Rambam is indeed referring to the mitzvah of Mezuzah. This being so, why does he not state explicitly it is obligatory to be scrupulous with regard to the mitzvah of Mezuzah? When the Rambam says it is obligatory to be scrupulous, he is not referring to the degree of observance, but rather is making it clear that one must be scrupulous in seeing to it that the mitzvah of Mezuzah has an appropriate effect. This is why he goes on to say, whenever he enters or leaves his house, he will encounter the unity of his name. He will be reminded of his love for him and will be roused from his sleep and the errors of indulging in mundane delights. He will then know that only knowledge of God is eternal. He will immediately come to his senses and follow the paths of righteousness. This aspect of Mezuzah is not a part of the performance of the mitzvah, for that is accomplished by merely affixing the Mezuzah to the doorpost and keeping it there. Thus the Rambam is describing the impact that the Mezuzah is to have. The dwelling's inhabitant should be scrupulous in seeing to it that whenever he encounters the Mezuzah, he will be reminded of his love for God and will be roused from his sleep and follow the paths of righteousness. This sheds light on another statement of the Rambam. The Rambam concludes the laws of Mezuzah with the statement, the early sages have said, whoever has tefillin on his head and hand, tzitzis on his garment, and a mezuzah on his entrance, is assured that he will not sin, for he has many reminders that save him from sin. The Rambam quotes this statement only in the laws of mezuzah, and not earlier in the laws of tefillin, or later in the laws of tzitzis. According to the above explanation, however, this seeming omission is entirely understandable, for it is the mezuzah as an object, as opposed to tefillin and tzitzis, that serves as a reminder. As explained earlier by the Rambam, it is the overall sanctity of tefillin that keeps a person from sin. With regard to tzitzis as well, the Rambam explains that it is the commandment of tzitzis, inasmuch as it acts as a reminder of all the commandments, that keeps a person from sin. It is only with regard to Mezuzah, though, possessing as it does the unity of his name, that the object itself keeps one from sinning by serving as a perfect reminder. Now, the manna. The Pasuk says, Vayuanacha, Vayarivecha, Vayachilacha samon. He afflicted you and suffered you to hunger and fed you with manna in order to make you know that man does not live by bread alone. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was asked by his disciples, why didn't the manna come down for Israel just once a year? He replied, I shall give you a parable. This thing may be compared to a king of flesh and blood who had an only son, whom he provided with maintenance once a year, so that he would visit his father once a year only. Thereupon he provided for his maintenance every day, so that he called on him every day. The same with Israel. One who had 4 or 5 children would worry, saying, perhaps no manna will come down tomorrow, and all will die of hunger. Thus they were found to turn their attention to their Father in heaven and think about him constantly. For 40 years the children of Israel were sustained by bread from heaven, instilling in them the recognition that sustenance comes entirely from God, that no matter how much a person toils to earn his livelihood, he receives no more and no less than what has been allotted him from above. The challenge is to retain this recognition also after entering the land and making the transition to bread from the earth. Even when we are nourished by bread which we earn by the sweat of our brow, we must remember that in truth our sustenance comes from God, and that we never receive an iota more or an iota less than what is allotted us from above. Now, 2 ways of loving God. So Moshe then told the Jewish people they should express their love of God not only as individuals, but as a community. V'haya im la'avo es Hashem Elokeichem la'avdoi v'chol levavchem. If you love God with all your heart and with all your soul. This verse seems to repeat a similar verse in the previous section of the Torah. But in that verse we are told to love God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. Apparently, there are 2 levels of intensity in loving God. One that includes with all our might, in other words, constantly rising above what we consider to be rational or even possible, and one that does not. This is because we are not all the same. Some of us can maintain a constant awareness of God's presence in our lives that inspires us to love him with all our might, while some of us cannot maintain this awareness constantly. Nonetheless, even those of us who can serve God only with all our heart and all our soul on an ongoing basis can still rise to serve Him with all your might occasionally. In the Messianic future, however, we will all be able to sustain this high level of divine awareness. It is for this reason that both versions of our love of God, have been included in the text of our daily prayers. Now, the meaning of rain. For the land where you are entering is not like the land of Egypt, where you did sow your seed and did water it by foot like a vegetable garden. Rather, it drinks water of the rain of heaven. So rain represents the reciprocal relationship between heaven and earth. A vapor rises from the earth to the heavens, and the heavens return it as rain which quenches the face of the land. That quote is from Bereshit. This represents the spiritual truth that an arousal from below evokes an arousal from above, that God responds to the efforts of man, reciprocating our prayers, yearnings, and deeds with nurture from above. This is the doctrine of the rain-watered land. Egypt, however, was nourished not by descending rain, but rather by the overflow of the Nile, which would periodically flood the land. The spiritual Egyptian is one who does not recognize the heavenly source of the blessings of life. He believes that all is generated from below, that everything he has and has achieved is of his own making. The people of Israel had been subjected to the Egyptian mentality for 4 generations. Thus they had to spend 40 years in the desert, during which they were subjected to a diametrically opposed set of circumstances, in which one's daily bread descends from heaven and one's own efforts have no effect on the result. Only after this lesson in the true source of life could they enter the land that drinks water of the rain of heaven, where man's efforts are crucial and significant, yet are permeated with a recognition of and dependence upon the true source of all. That's from the Hasidic masters, and that's the end of Parsha Eikev. We'll be back with Parsha Re'eh, Bezrat Hashem, God willing, next week. Until then, have a great week, and shalom.